All right, we're here. As much wellness as possible, episode 16. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Derek and Lyna. Glad you're both with us. And we have two guests on today from Farmshed here in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. We have Jenny Riggenbach and Joel Kuenhold. We'll each have them introduce themselves shortly. And really, the topic that we're going to be talking about today, one I'm super excited about, is the idea of local food shed, what that means, why it's important, especially now during COVID, and why it's going to be super important going into the future. So, with that, Jenny, do you want to go first? A quick intro, and we can pass it to Joel, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having us. I'm Jenny Riggenbach, and I became executive director of Farmshed in October. My background is really in rural economic development and job quality issues, and really was drawn to Farmshed after serving on the board and being involved for a number of years, and just knowing in my heart, growing up in this community, that family farms, cooperatively owned farms, have a vital role to a healthy economy, and connecting more people to that and to that delicious food is, what I love. And it's been a real pleasure, being able to work with this wonderful group of people, including Joel, who's going to smile, I bet, right? Maybe.
You're just not used to my concentrating face.
Joel?
That's all. Oh, is it my turn?
Perfect. Thanks, Jenny. Yes, Joel, we're going to pass the Zoom baton to you.
The talking stick? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm Joel Kuenhold, and I own Lonely Oak Farm, which is a highly diversified farming operation in Millador. And it consists of a 100-member CSA, 200 head herd of sheep, small beef herd, around 100 hogs, 150 laying hens. We also have a farm to fork restaurant here on the farm. And we also are a food processing facility as well, although that is a very tiny aspect of our farm operations, because that's really tricky to make that work. And we haven't figured out how to make that work. And then in addition to that, I serve on the Farmshed board in the farmer advisory role, or whatever that might be now as we move forward. And I also am on the chair of the Citizens Advisory Council for the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems at UW-Madison, where I do a lot of work with how we promote integration within agriculture and sustainability through a lot of different outreach services. It's very interesting, and I like to take a lot of that back here to our community and see how we can implement it. I was also an agricultural education instructor for 13 years in Stevens Point and Wisconsin Rapids at the high school that I attended. So I have a pretty strong background in education, and that really frames a lot of what I want to do and where and why this farm looks the way that it does.
Damn, I love it. Thank you both for joining us today. So let's dive into, and for people listening, watching, they can go back. We sat down with Tommy Enright, and we talked about the problems we're seeing. I even have a podcast with Will Schulze talking about the problems in the dairy world, but we're seeing these bottlenecks in the modern food chain. So the processing is all for these large places are all being done in these very few places, and now those are shut down. So the food is there, it's just not getting to the grocery store. So when we look at local food, I know that's a buzzword, right? The localvore movement, local eating, that kind of thing. I want to dive more into that today, because as we were all talking before the podcast, social media is full of content right now, both good and bad, and there's some confusion going on as to, oh, I have this pig, now what? Joel and I were talking about this previously, like you just because you have the pig doesn't mean you can take it somewhere necessarily and get it butchered that day or the next day. There's this long. There's schedules that need to be that go out, the certifications for these places, all that kind of stuff. So I want to talk about the idea of a food shed and Farmshed, the Farm Fresh Atlas, and then we can talk about what those things are, why they're important, and then we can start to dive into it a little bit more with Derek and Lyna. So Jenny, if you want to go first, or Joel, whoever wants to jump on the question I threw out.
And Jenny.
What was the question?
So
the question.
The question is, what is a food shed, and why? What is Farmshed doing, and what is the Farm Fresh Atlas doing?
Okay, so Farmshed, we're located in Stevens Point downtown, in the old Sorensen's greenhouse, which was renovated by volunteers and committed members of Farmshed. That alone is a beautiful story, which we can talk about another time. But what I would say are, starting with our mission, which is to build a resilient food economy, local food economy, or local food community. I get the question a lot, what does that mean? And I think at the heart of it, it's what Farmshed is, we're feeding people local food. We've got products and services. We've got a growing collective that is in the midst of their plant sale. That's really geared towards, getting people exposed in eating local food. We also, we support and launch businesses and local farms right from our facility. We've got a kitchen that has, we're about to sign our 6th tenant into that kitchen right now. And all these beautiful local businesses starting right there in downtown Stevens Point, all with the lens towards how do I source my ingredients locally. And again, another amazing story, 6 amazing stories right now. And then, educating people about local food so they can take the next best step for them and their families. That's how I view our what Farmshed is, and it's like all under one roof. And there's so many diversified programs and people that are involved in that. So I could go on and on, but I'll stop there and let Joel jump in.
I think that was a really great synopsis of what Farmshed is, and and what a food shed is, which is the interconnectedness, the intersectionality between eaters, growers, and those people that are in the middle. And that's a really big, I don't know, entity to try and break down. And definitely with the rise of COVID and what's happening right now, and also our political climate, has really changed agriculture, I think, more in the past 6 months than like in the past 20 years. So there's just a lot of things that are compounding right now. And I think we're sitting at a precipice right now, like something is going to change, but I don't know what it looks like. Well, I know what I want it to look like, but I don't know how we can get there. And I also really feel that, we're seeing the underbelly of the beast right now, and we have an opportunity to act, and we need to mobilize that immediately. And I would like to reflect on that Facebook group that we were discussing earlier, and how that happened. I'd really like to dig deep into that and see how that group took off and what's happening there, and what we can do to learn from that, and how we can take the positives from that and make that even bigger, and how we can also at the same time evaluate the negatives and figure out what we need to do there. And I think that a lot of these solutions seem really apparent. They just are going to cost a lot of money. They're going to cost a lot of things. They're also going to cost a lot of emotional investment as well, and that's a really scary thing too.
Boom. So, thank you both. I love it. the intersectionality of it is something I've been thinking about as well from the health fitness standpoint. When I decided to set up roots in Stevens Point and decided to stay here, live here, work here, my personal love of food, hunting, the outdoor space, health, right? That all kind of comes together, and which led me to Farmshed and its mission and the idea of how do we get out this information? How do we get out the farmer stories, the food? How do we get that out into this other world? Because I was going to the farmers market or Farmshed events, and I wasn't seeing any of the health and fitness people, or very few, just the people that had happened to already kind of exist in the Farmshed world. So to me, it was thinking, how do I combine that, or how do I bring back this Farmshed mission into a digestible message for the health and fitness world? And that, there's the CSA at the gym we have now, where it's just me constantly reminding people. So everyone there has similar goals as everyone in this Zoom chat, right? We all value clean air, clean water, how land is managed, local economies, in health and fitness especially. There's always the talk of healthy foods, healthful foods. There's words like clean eating, bad eating, paleo, all of these buzzwords in fitness. And for me, it's always, how can I take that conversation where the world of health and fitness is at right now, and how do I steer that back to local food? How do I meet them where they're at with their language they're using, with my knowledge of why Farmshed is important, why what Joel's doing at Lonely Oak is important, and get people to go to the local food market. The gym I work at, D1, is right down the road from the Winter Farmers Market. And my first winter here, I would wager 85% of the people at the gym I work at now didn't know that was just down the road. And now all winter, it's like workout at D1 on Saturday mornings, go hit up the farmers market down the road. Like, that's the thing. That's people's schedule now for meal prep. And then last year I launched the meal prep series at Farmshed. We got people, yeah, it's fun. Exactly. It's sharing that story, getting people involved in their local food shed. So when Joel mentions intersectionality, I love that idea. And that's kind of, I think, where this Facebook group blew up, is somehow this happened. That intersectionality was met on social media. Now I want to get people diving a little deeper maybe on this. And so like the world Lyna works in, the university level, in business, where are we going to meet people in that world around these causes? Because I guarantee a lot of people Lyna knows. I know Lyna cares about these things, clean air, clean water, how the land is used. How do we meet those people, meet that group of people where they're at, so we can deliver this message? And the same thing with Derek, where he works. I know he's being able to launch all of these great programs and ideas of wellness into his field now that COVID is here. And I can't help but wonder, how do we then get people more interested in their local food shed? So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, and Bill, let's dive in. So on this Facebook group, because this is an area I think some of the listeners may not understand or have an idea of what we're talking about with a Facebook group. So let's dive in and talk about what has happened, and what we need to learn from, and what are the key talking points that this addresses for us as we build our case for local food, sustainable farming, and how that connects to wellness.
Sounds good. Joel, do you want to talk about this group?
So as you decide to talk about that, Bill.
Sure. From what I know. So it started, I'm not really sure where it started. It just appeared on my Facebook feed. and then the ag teacher at Auburndale, who has been doing a really tremendous job during this time. Like, he's mobilized the students and community resources into getting food to people that need it, and raising awareness that, you know, we can operate independently of the super mega industrial food chains that are in place, that we have one here. And I will say that, you know, and so then this Facebook thing just started getting rolling. Like, people started paying attention to it, and it was really promoted. And I saw that from Mark Knoyer's point of view and how he was utilizing that as a teacher and what he was doing with the students and community members that were involved in Auburndale FFA, and all those types of things. And then I started to see some of my peers, my fellow farmers that were doing things that very similar to me, becoming involved. My first impression was to just like, you know, I'm already in the Farm Fresh Atlas. I already do these things. Right now I'm maxed out at the markets, you know, like I could see at that point. And right now, like, you know, there's been a huge demand, even though I haven't had single customers coming and buying bulk amounts of meat. I've had a lot more people coming to buy meat, which has been a really good thing. And but one thing that I'm thinking about as this is happening is, how do we sustain that? And how do we keep those people from returning to Walmart and, you know, Costco and those places to get their food when it's right here? So anyways, so people have really been getting into this, but another thing that they've been doing is they've been targeting farms who do not necessarily, or have not in the past, in a formalized way, engaged selling direct to consumers. So there's a lot of dairy farmers, you know, I mean, of every animal that's born on a dairy farm, because that's how you get milk, is you just keep that cow pregnant and lactating. You know, 50% is going to be a bull, a male, and you can't milk that. And you really don't need, you know, they're not monogamous. So, you know, a farmer really doesn't even keep bulls anymore. It's kind of not a thing in the dairy industry. So what do we do with these animals? You know, they have to go to someplace, and they were going into the mainstream commodity market, but the bottom is falling out of that. But, you know, honestly, the bottom's been falling out of that for like my whole life. So, you know, it's unfortunate that it's taking a pandemic for people to realize that that's happening and that there is an alternative place for it. But that's a whole nother discussion. So people were joining into that group, and they were selling things like that. Like, I have a cow that's for sale, or I have 40 hogs that I can't sell. When the reality is, they still could have sold them into the mainstream market. They just weren't going to get the price that they were getting before. So one of the negative aspects is, we had people that have 40 hogs all of a sudden flood the market. Not necessarily flood the market in terms of getting the food to the consumers, but flood the middlemen, the butchers, the processors, with that, which are, you know, few and far between. And, you know, and there's a certain way that you operate. You understand how to operate with your processors, so that you maintain your supply and you have your opportunity to have your animals processed. So like, and Wisconsin, we're sitting in a very good spot. Wisconsin is a lot better than most or all of the other 49 states, in that we still have retained, because of our strong dairy background, a lot of the infrastructure within local food, which makes it easier. I mean, if we were in Illinois, we'd be screwed, because Illinois has basically no animal agriculture and no small processors that people can work with. And a lot of states are that way, where you might have to drive 3 or 4 hours to get your animal to a butcher. And then you're going to pay through the nose in order to have that happen. So this group kind of facilitated moving these animals and, you know, getting away from large scale commodity and industrial processing and things like that. And it raised a lot of awareness. And I think one of the best things about it is, I started to see people who were, or who felt that the local food economy was kind of a joke, or it wasn't really a real thing, or it wasn't making a significant economic impact. And therefore they weren't going to do it, or it was too much work, which is true. It's a lot of work. But that doesn't, there's different things you can manage that. And so one of the great things is that Facebook made a lot of these producers see that, yes, you can, by using your network, sell direct to consumers, and no, it isn't going to be absolutely awful, that you can navigate this and you can make it happen. So good and bad that came out of this, I think. And I really want to look at that and see how we can leverage that and how we move forward within our own promotion of local food here in central Wisconsin.
I like it. Lyna, I think you got cut off at one point. What were you going to say earlier?
I don't remember. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yep. I can hear you.
Good. Well, so I want to ask Jenny about that. I've seen at Farmshed there's been an uptick or a shift in your social media marketing. At least there has been for me. Maybe I'm paying attention more. But if there has been a shift, how is Farmshed using social media differently, and how do you see using it even differently going forward, Jenny?
Thanks, Lyna. So we don't have nearly as many followers as this group. The Direct Wisconsin Farm group has like 42,000. It's a crazy number considering it's supposedly focused just on Wisconsin. So I agree with Joel, like figuring that out and understanding a little bit more would be really great, because Farmshed, we've got around 4,000 followers. The minute that this started, Krista Bridle, who does our communications, she just quickly got on it and really just started putting out information on social media. She already did a really good job, but just really picked it up. And also to Joel's point about the network, it doesn't all have to come from Farmshed, right? Like it's about the network. Yes. Farmshed isn't about one person. It's not about a staff. It's about a community of people that's more made up of the volunteers and members than it is around our small staff, mostly part-time people. So she really just took it and started just tagging and following people and sharing that out. So that's one thing we did, which I think has had a really nice impact. We've also launched a farm membership. Bill mentioned the Farm Fresh Atlas. We have 83 farms in an 11-county region, all selling direct to consumer in our Atlas in central Wisconsin. That's pretty remarkable. We've got this really strong Atlas. But what we also know is that not everyone who lists in the Atlas just wants a listing. Some people want to do more. Some people do more. And so what we did was the board agreed to launch, we were going to do this anyway, but we launched a membership for farms so that we could really learn about who's interested in more and what are they interested in. And so part of that has been, as we moved all of our workshops and things to an online format similar to this, how do we promote those that are diversifying the way Joel's talking about and really looking to connect with those consumers in a different way and really engage in a different way. And so we've been hosting those folks in conversations, getting information out about the markets, getting information out about, how do you even understand how to buy meat? Discussion on that. And we've got some more coming up with some of our local chefs now that are starting to get back in the swing of things. Some cooking demos. Again, working with our network. We've got a nutritionist in town, Kaylee, you guys know. She's been doing a lot of great content. So also trying to pull in that health connection where we can to help, again, diversify who's hearing, who might be hearing the Farmshed message and through different voices as well. Not everybody speaks Farmshed.
So in my field, one of the famous experiments in my field of change management and organization development is this study or this piece of work that came out of World War II. So the food supply chain changed during World War II, and there was a whole different set of meats available to consumers, right? And so a very famous theorist in my field did a piece of work around the force field analysis. That's what it's called. So people aren't buying the meats, the visceral meats from the animal, and that's the food they have left here for us in the US. And so the force field analysis said something really interesting in terms of why people weren't eating those meats and weren't preparing them. It was because they couldn't cook them. Well, that was one of the things. They didn't have any experience with them, and they didn't know how to make them. So I've always thought that and I've been hanging out with the local food people here for a long time, trying to figure out what's our hypothesis. Why can't we get to more consumers? And I think there's two factors. I think it's convenience and preparation. And I love what Coach Callie is doing, because I think that gets to preparation. I think it can start to. I don't know that we're cracking the nut on it yet. But then the piece that we still haven't figured out is convenience, right? So much of our culture is organized around what in my family we call the Disney store. That's what we call like the big grocery store. If we still have a couple of products that we get, and so somebody in the family will say, "Oh, I have to go to Disney. Do you need anything?" And that that means a big store with all the music and the lights and this. We always, our rule is if we can buy it from a farmer, we do. That's first. We can't buy it from a farmer, then we buy it from the co-op. If we can't buy it from the co-op, then do we really need it? And if we really like it, need is interesting, right? So then we'll go to Disney and get it. But that's not how most of the culture shops. And when I ask people, like my colleagues, why don't you go to the market? The market's happening. Look, how about, do you want to, we've been early adopters of almost every food product that's come out. So for example, we were early adopters of what's the vegetable, frozen vegetables?
Frozen assets.
Frozen assets. We adore frozen assets. But when I've asked other people when I've asked other people about any product we've gotten, why they didn't consume it, and they said, "Oh, it takes too much time. I don't know how to get it. It's an extra thing that I have to do." And I think that's our big challenge, is breaking through that convenience barrier. And one of my theories, Jenny.
Well, I think your theory is well-founded. I would tell you one of the cool things, I mean, it's, and I don't say this lightly when I say kind of cool things about COVID, because I do take it very seriously, what's happening and what's happening to people, both economically and health-wise. It's a frightening time for a lot of people. And one of the things that we quickly did is actually reach out to the food pantries and the meal sites to find out what are ways that Farmshed could play a role to really help to bring more local food into the mix, and not just for the short term, but for the long term. We have amazing farms that donate really quietly into those programs. And how do we kind of build it into the infrastructure that exists? Well, through that, our idea was Annie Wetter, who is a professor at the university, another board member, she and I started having these conversations, and we kind of went into it like, okay, we got this great grant opportunity, and we thought we just get more fresh vegetables, or process those fresh vegetables and just do more frozen assets and move them into the system. And honestly, what we heard from people who are working with the most vulnerable in our community is exactly the same thing that you're saying about, consumers that are paying top dollar for things, which is we're looking for convenience, healthy convenience. And so we went, you know what? We have been hearing this. I was hearing this before I joined Farmshed. We got to figure this out. I don't have an answer for it today, but I'm going to have an answer tomorrow, because yesterday we hired our local food manager, Trevor Drake, who's going to graduate with his master's from UWSP this summer. We shifted our thinking from, we used to call this position the local kitchen, or the kitchen manager. Well, it's bigger than the kitchen, right? It's all of these elements of local food. And so Trevor just comes with a lot of a lot of great excitement and energy and ideas around exactly what we're talking about. And I'm a firm believer that, Farmshed is a nonprofit. We don't exist to compete. We exist to add value to. And sometimes adding value to might at first look like we are, creating a line that someone else should do for sole profit. My belief is that we need more of it all, right? And if Farmshed can play a role in seeding some of that and sustain programming, because we can offer something like a frozen assets or something like a prepared meal, then we should do that, right? And we can do that in partnership. We will always do that by paying farms for their product, but we do play a role in activating that as well. So I think you can look forward to Farmshed having more solutions that are targeted to exactly that kind of convenience for folks.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, congrats on hiring Trevor. T-Bone is the best.
Well, you'll have to have him on.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's, as we're talking, it reminds me, there's this kind of perplexing situation, or I don't want to call it a dichotomy really, but there's this really interesting situation we have here in central Wisconsin, in that we are spoiled as a local farming, well-connected, vibrant community, rich in resources. Like you said, you have 83 farms in the central Wisconsin area alone in your atlas, and we're bountiful with the education, the awareness, and the knowledge of our resource base. And there are vibrant community connections, and both of you just hinted at all the things that make this community special. However, I do feel like for some reason this isn't seen as part of our broader wellness spectrum, and that to some degree may be the fault of the wellness community. And so I know for years, Jenny, when Lane was previously at Farmshed, I would bring her into our Central Wisconsin Worksite Wellness Network to provide just information on what Farmshed is up to connect companies with CSAs and local farms, to try to get drop points at different companies and help build corporate farmers markets. And there have been some really successful operations that's happened. And Bill, as an advocate of that, shows what can happen when you have a wellness champion inside of a corporate environment or his gym environment, and then that changes the conversation, but what we don't have are enough Bills at every company being the champion, and we don't have a lot of those resources. And we end up, I know within a couple organizations that we were trying to make connections with, there was a lot of anxiety about having a CSA drop, which sounds absurd at one level, but you understand their daily operations, it makes some sense. And so we have this pro agriculture community in a lot of ways, and of course, like the three of us, Bill, Lyna, and I, are all fans and consumers of most of what you do. However, when I speak to the wellness community, this isn't something that is a regular part of that fabric yet. And so we have a university that's founded. One of the founders of the field is here at UWSP. Stevens Point's long been considered the mecca of wellness, but I still feel like we have this spectrum that we haven't closed the gap enough yet. And so I'm asking, as a wellness practitioner, what are things that I might be able to do to continue to be a stronger advocate for you and to help grow and close this gap, so that we can start to look at sustainable, locally grown food as part of our overall wellness picture.
Joel, you want to jump in on that one? I got a whole bunch of things, but I went last.
Okay. It's really, I'm stuttering. But when it comes
It's
to
called
selling
thinking.
yeah, when it comes to selling your product to restaurants, for example. So I work with 4 or 5 different chefs, and every single chef has a very different way of communicating and purchasing, and a whole different way that we have to interact with them. And some of them are really chill and easygoing. Some of them are like, I need a spreadsheet that's gonna, come here, and I need to know for the next 6 months and XYZ. And so you come home and you're like, oh, but I also have to work 12-hour days in the field. And, like the easiest way for me to do this is to send out a text. So, so there's always this breakdown. And, and when I try to work with businesses about getting Millennial Farm CSA into, for instance, the Marshfield Medical Complex is incredibly difficult to go into in terms of local food. Like,
Yep.
I just don't understand. And I'm sorry, but it's stupid. Like, they got to pull their head out of wherever it's at. And like, food is
Sand.
So,
I work for Ascension, so thank you.
Yeah, well, but it's really difficult to work with the medical complex about this thing that is the root of so many health issues. And so there's an education gap on both ends there, from farmers not knowing what to do. And, for many people that have a farm, they've never had a job in a school district or in a large business or corporation. So they don't know the chain of command that has to be followed, because they're not used to that. And then there's, people in the large businesses that don't understand what it's like to be the person that is the HR director and the business director and chief operating officer and the janitor and everything else. So what do we do? And so I think that's a thing that we really could work at, is how do we communicate and how do we make these things easier, if that's a goal for your business to do. I guess is my takeaway from there. But Jenny's going to have a lot more better things to say. So.
Well, and remember, I'm new to all this, and I wasn't planning on a pandemic in my first year. So, but one of the things that I do really want us to move towards is, when I said we have like this farm membership, is really digging into what Joel's talking about, and how do we create a service out of that, right? And what does that service look like? So we're adding value from both, the big healthcare system, for example. It could be, it could also be a manufacturer, right? And helping them, in easy ways, make those connections. So that's not a direct answer to your question about what can you do. But I would say, when it comes to like things that you guys could do, I think it's exactly what you were saying about, it's not part of the health conversation. It's not part of our economic conversation either, right? And that's my background. And that's like, it's still treated as this special novelty thing that some people do until they figure it out that they have to go get a job again.
Yeah.
Right. Which really what that is that we burn people out when they do that. Or we have, a lot of farms have off farm income. So I think it's like asking better questions and helping people to, just even begin to understand, based on the questions we ask ourselves about where our food comes from, about, our stories about why we started. I always say, for my family, it started with, I just committed to eggs, right? Like that was going to be the first step. And then I realized, I can actually get my greens year round here locally. And I don't have to worry about salmonella, right? And so then it was all greens, and like it just snowballed from there. Now we haven't purchased meat from Disneyland in 2 years. We eat less meat, but we eat better meat. And and my kids are learning a whole different value system around around wellness and around the role of what you eat plays in an economy, in keeping things moving. So I think it's just about little things and how we, better questions we can ask ourselves and each other to keep it at the forefront and move it outside of like this novelty thing and really into the center of everything we do.
Yeah. For me, it's about making the invisible visible. And so I want to read the definition of a food shed. The term food shed is used to describe a region of food flows. And this is the first keyword, flows, from the area where it is produced to the place where it is consumed, including the land it grows on, the route it travels, the markets it passes through, and the tables it ends up on. And so what we do in our house when we're not under quarantine and we have people for dinner is that we're always tracing those flows back, and we do it really subtly. A lot of people in America pray around their food. And so we pray for every farmer, and we go through the whole food chain. Like, where did this come from? Right. So we know, so if we sit down to dinner, we might have 7 people's farms at our table, and we know them all by name. And we give thanks for them, and we ask that they get what they need. But because we do that prayer before we sit down, whoever's at our table, if they don't regularly eat with us, they're like, that was different. And so then we have conversations about the flow of food. We
Thank you.
Right? From the table to the farm. And it goes different places, right?
Mm-hmm. It's the story, right? And the more we can connect people right back to the story, then they're part of it, and then they get to be part of this story in your meal.
Right.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Right. Remember that cow your experiment, Joel, the angry cows, and then you told me some stories about the cows being angry, and you were really glad to sell the meat. So whenever I serve that meat, I'm like, Joel said this cow was a jerk. I went unstable.
And she disappeared.
Sorry about that. I went unstable.
There's this.
There.
Yeah, I think that's, that for us, and this is one of the, I feel like I'm fighting this all the time. Maybe not necessarily fighting, but aggressively pushing that we expand. When we're talking about wellness, our definition has been so narrowly focused for so long. And that's partly due to our own making in the wellness field and the practitioners and the business side of what wellness is. You kind of have in the wellness field, you have basically like 3 giant pools of when people talk about wellness, they're talking about in the corporate side, you're talking about brokers and insurance companies and all they're invested in risk management. And we've been calling that wellness for a long time. That's really health promotion. And that's the science of disease prevention and disease management. And unfortunately, that has a lot of weight on how we think about wellness. So at the company, often our wellness program is siloed in the HR department who knows nothing about wellness or keeping people happy. And yet that's where you find wellness. And then you have the fitness field that uses the term wellness often because they're doing it with the best intention, but it still leaves it in the physical fitness realm too, unless you have a really innovative group or company that's expanding that definition and, have people like Bill as the wellness champion who really understands when we talk about wellness, what that means and looks at it from a whole person point of view. And then you have, unfortunately, the Gwyneth Paltrows of the world who co-opt the term for freaky, unscientific, spiritual renewal, personal growth in not the best way, but it's also an elitist culture. And so that damages the opportunity for us to talk about local locally grown organic foods to some degree, because sometimes those are the same people that are loud champions of eating clean or eating whole foods and eating healthy. And it's seen sometimes as an elitist part of people's lives. And that's where I think in Wisconsin, we're at such an advantage. We have, like you've talked about, I mean, you look at how we are helping in every capacity to try to get locally grown fresh foods to as many people as possible, and trying to get to the underrepresented and underserved populations. But that doesn't happen across the country. Like we're just way ahead of the game in some respects. So the narrative, though, isn't regional or just Wisconsin, but that wellness narrative is somewhat of part of the bigger culture. And so I think this is one of our fights, is to work on this together, like you said, to help better connect the messages. And I think people in COVID, one of the situations that this has allowed us to do is to talk about value and purpose, and really think about where our waste in our life is, and then try to minimize that. And so there's a real opportunity for Farmshed and for collective farm groups and movements around the country to elevate their messaging, because a lot of people are looking at their life and values, and because they're spending dollars that are precious and not as bountiful as they might have been, or they're in fear because we're not sure what the economy is going to be doing in the future. We're looking for how can our dollars best serve our personal goals. And I think this is, I feel like this is a really great opportunity for what both of you are involved with, to elevate this as a wellness concept, not just a locally grown food concept, or in whatever agriculture paradigm that people are thinking. And this is part of our whole life. Like, this is part of well living, is to do our best to understand the flow of food, to buy things, to purchase foods that are rooted in our local economies, and that help people sustain our local culture and local economy in that way. And so I think this is a rich opportunity. I'm hopeful that we're closing that gap. And there's no question about that. I just want to throw that out there as what I'm thinking about as we're all talking, is that the best thing we can do is to continue to drive this as a wellness concept, not just a local food concept, but this is part of healthy living.
Derek, I appreciate what you're saying, because the word that I keep going back to is choice. And it's adding another choice element, whether if your wellness path is keto, or if your wellness path is, following Gwyneth Paltrow or Oprah or whoever, it is about choice, and you have an ability to choose to direct some of your purchasing to locally. And then the question is, how do I know, and where do I get it, right? And that's and we have a growing network of, in the last even decade since Farmshed's been around. The co-op has moved to more local. We've got more CSAs. We've got more people engaged all the time. And I like to always come back to the point where it's not an all or nothing. I remember I used to think that, before Joel, schooled me. But it isn't that, you can only be part of Farmshed and the local food movement if you buy everything locally. The reality is, very few of us do that, right? And very few. And I've got 3 kids. The idea that I am like the perfect mother who always cooks every meal for I try and do a good job, but they still, get their fair share of crap, but yet, we make a concerted effort, and like I said, we've just moved more and more into that world. So it's not an all or nothing, and I think the more we can help people also just have that aha moment of, oh, this is one more choice I have, and how do we create more choice for people, whether it's the factor Lyna was talking about, or working with farms like Joel to make sure that the choices he provides get into our large employers, because those are great opportunities.
Yeah.
How do we narrow the gap between choices? So, and maybe this is kind of nebulous, but like we can choose to eat local because it's healthy, or we can choose to eat local because it's sustains our rural or local economy. We can choose to eat local because we want to support our friends. Like, that's always one thing that I question is how do we promote saying this is all of this? And there's 37 choices out there, but if you choose to eat or drink siren shrimp or something, then you just have closed the gap in all this, and it really goes into your value system as well. I don't know. Do you understand? But that's a thing I would like to know as a marketer, like, how do I make that apparent? And how do we get people to really buy into that?
So here's one thought that I've been playing around with, but we can talk about here. You guys can be our focus group. But as we kind of dive into, really, we've got 3 projects this summer that we're going to start moving local food into our community meal programs. I mean, we had 34% of Portage County residents experiencing challenges buying food before the pandemic. It's only going to get worse. It's only getting worse right now. And we, the 5 of us don't necessarily see that as closely as other people, right? So the 3 programs that we're connecting with right away this summer are through CAP Services Uplift program. We're going to be helping to source local ingredients they're working with 2 Hmong restaurants in town to create meals for elders, culturally appropriate meals for elders and disabled Hmong residents. So we're going to help source that, and we're going to help try and bring more of the Hmong farmers into Farmshed. We're also working with the mobile food pantry on getting more local product into those boxes that are getting out to families in the rural parts of the county, many of which are actually retired farmers, is what we're finding out. So that's going to be another one. And then the third is for about 11 years, since the beginning days of Farmshed, there's been a group of Farmshed members that has been making a meal at the Hope Center once a month, the Salvation Army, and that's open to residents and it's open to the broader community. And it's pretty quiet that they do that, and we want to work to increase the number of meals we can provide there. So I say all of that because I asked, now I'm going to ask the question, if, let's say, for every bottle of spaghetti sauce that Joel sells, if a certain percentage of that was going to go back to Farmshed to help create that value chain back into giving, kind of like the Tom shoes, right? Could we actually start doing more and helping more people connect to that idea of how far my local dollar will now stretch? Yeah. It's not just about this exchange between me and the direct buy, but now now I'm part of the community, and I'm part of ensuring everyone has access to this delicious, healthy food. Yeah. I pose that question to you all. If we had more of that, would that be a way that we could start broadening our message?
Well, Joel framed his question as a marketing question, right? So if you're going to market, you have to have the resources to be able to hit target markets and particular segments with targeted messages. And no single farmer is ever going to do that because of the 12-hour day that Joel described. So that leads me to believe that an outreach and marketing aggregator could certainly do some good.
Yeah, I agree with Lyna. I think, we struggle with this too, because there's, and I say this when I say we, I'm talking about in wellness, because of how different definitions are and what the concepts are between different marketplaces and who you're talking to. But I think all of these sound tremendously wonderful. What I don't think it does is really change or extend the message of who you are, because all of these are just extensions of the same value system that you have in place right now. And yes, I think I'm at one level more exposure of all of the different ways you're helping people is absolutely wonderful. But I think to really close the gap, we have to look at, so if I look at all of the people that you're supporting in these capacities, the key thing that I come back to is without some generous support, they're likely, how many of these are likely going to be your consumers in the future? If you know what I mean, you may need grant funding or partnerships or some sort of development to make these things happen. And so you can create a funding mechanism. So like selling as much pasta sauce, and a percentage of that goes to these places. But so that will hopefully create that'll start a movement. But I think we still need to look at the average person who, when they think of food, thinks of Metro Market. The average person hasn't yet understood that, yes, I'm going and I'm shopping in the organic section, or I'm getting Amy's, brand. Like there's, how people act and what they think they're doing. And so they're still not going to fully embrace all the different things that you and Joel are doing in that way. And that's the message that I want to continue to try to pursue, is how do we message to the average person who has some interest in eating better, but they still haven't made that connection fully, that the best way to get that is through Farmshed or through Joel or through any other of the CSAs in the area or local farms. And so they're more apt to still go to Disneyland and get an organic or farm raised meat, or whatever choice they're making. They think they're making a good choice, but they're still not making it for the benefit of the local economy. And so I think those are things too so there's two sides of that. I think all of those things you brought up are absolutely tremendous and wonderful and will be impactful. But I still think there will be a gap that we're still going to try to close in the average person thinking about their wellness. And this is part of that overall picture.
Okay, so don't, Derek, shoot me on this. But
No,
so I want to go back to the medical complex and the role that food plays in it.
Yes.
And then I also want you to think at the same time about how medicine is marketed, pharmaceuticals and things like that. And it's getting harder and harder to find grants that are, easy to get, that target building local food system. Like it's losing some of its sex appeal right now. But one thing that doesn't seem to be losing sex appeal is pharmaceuticals and how we are marketing those. Like I just got National Geographic today, which is my favorite magazine, but it's filled with ads for drugs. How can we convince the medical complex, not just Marshfield and Ascension, but as a whole, to redirect their marketing from reactionary to proactionary, if that's even a word, so that we start bringing that back? We start bringing that sex appeal back about food and eating and what it is that you're buying and putting in your shopping cart, and that, yes, if you pay attention to what you're eating and you invest in the food that you're buying versus, paying all this money for a recreational drug like Cialis, like why can't there be 2 sexy soup pots instead of 2 people sitting in a bathtub with a fire? Like how can we convince the medical complex that, and the wellness industry that this is really where it's at, is, our very Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having our most basic needs being met, which is, finding something to eat. So how can we get that? And how can we leverage that? And how can we take the dollars that are spent and reinvest that into the value system and start to brainwash people that way?
Oh, I love it. And believe me, everything you just said, I wholeheartedly agree with. And I'm oftentimes a contrarian in a difficult industry, and so, and the most interesting part of this is not unknown or not something that hasn't been addressed within the wellness field for ages. So I used to direct the National Wellness Conference ages ago. So this concept of preventive wellness, so in different ways, but with food as a support system for healthy living. So I don't want to say it's a disease reducer, but in a way to support healthy living, food is, and better foods, locally grown foods. And that whole concept has been around for a while, and so the messaging though has been the problem. And for me, what I would love most is if the medical field would look at their preventive care strategies, and doctors would write prescriptions to go to a local farmer's market and identify to some degree, like, what should I go buy? Okay. So, but to get back to some of what Lyna was talking about earlier about convenience and preparation. So there's these layers of things we have to continue to fix. And I think eventually we will get deeper and fix some of these issues as we become more comfortable with the knowledge base that it requires for us to be thinking this way. But I do think that there is, I would love for doctors to be able to do that. Okay. But then, so if you think about it in the medical setting, then you need a registered dietitian to help them talk about what to do with the food, or you need a health educator who has some nutrition background to help on that end too. Because your medical doctor is going to have a 20-minute visit and they have productivity measures they have to meet, et cetera. But they could at least start with a prescription, and then you take it to your farmer's market. And I know this is a concept that's been floated around too with in our local here with Annie and some of the people at UWSP as well, that this is an idea that has some weight to it. But the system, as you've noticed, Joel, the healthcare system is so hard to crack. And the economy behind pharmaceuticals, I want to be skeptical. I don't want to be pessimistic, but we're fighting a nasty beast there if we're trying to put food up against pharmaceuticals. And I don't know if that's a fight. I don't think that's the approach we need to go with. I think we need to go with a continued presence of and here's where I say I'm like you in thinking this way. So oftentimes in the medical setting, if a large hospital system has a wellness director, oftentimes that's a medical director. Here's what happens when so that's already a losing cause, because that medical director is likely going to be focused on how many people have blood pressure, hypertensive issues, cholesterol. You start getting into risk management. So you've completely debased wellness for the sake of risk management. And so the message that you and I are talking about, it's likely never even going to get brought up, because they're too focused on how do I reduce hypertension? Here, I'm going to prescribe you some medication to take care of that. And we're not going to worry about the lifestyle changes that could probably help you. There are people, though, like me out there in the field that are helping bring together some different parts to try to help make that change happen. The problem is that it is such a complex industry that I don't have the big answer and the big solution, but there's plenty of ideas about how to help this conversation continue so we can find the right ideas that get traction in a larger way.
I think illness as an entry point for wellness and illness as an entry point for local food is a fabulous idea, because that's my journey, right? I described being a freak before, like that, how local food oriented we are now. We didn't just get that way. We got that way because of health issues. And it happened slowly, as Jenny said, choice by choice by choice. I think for me, have any of you been to Vegas? Anybody been to Las Vegas? Okay, so I went to Las Vegas for a wedding, and as a nonprofit person, I've been on boards. I've worked in nonprofits on and off through my whole life. That's how I feel like Joel is with Big Pharma, right? Like I was dying, like being in a casino, hearing all that money. I just wanted to freeze. If I could have 3 minutes of your cash, that's all I need. I need 3 minutes of your cash, and I'll make it go to work for you. And I think that's what Joel's saying. I think that's noble, Joel. I think we have to find the entry points. Illness is one. Moms are another. What are the other entry points?
So Derek, I'm curious if there is an entry point in some kind of, in a way that you could run trials on healthy people, or people like the people that are interested in health and wellness the way you're talking about. Because, you know, as I'm listening to you all talk, they have been trying the RX at the market for years. I've never been prescribed to go to the farmer's market, but you know, that the little sheet sits in my doctor's office every time I go in. And I just wonder, I often wonder who gets prescribed to go to the farmer's market, and what would happen if my family was prescribed that. What would that do? What would that further and change, you know, even my picky eater in my family? But I'm not the target for that. I don't think I walk in, I don't think I'm the person that they're thinking of towards that, right? Because none of us have diabetes or high blood pressure, but could we eat better? I'm sure. So anyway, I wonder sometimes, you know, to Joel's point, it is harder and harder to find grants. We spend a lot of time writing them, and with very, very little return. No business would spend the time doing that. There's like the return on it is so low. So it is like this game we play in nonprofit. But if there was an investment in actually measuring these things that could show to actually change, you know, and grow how people see it, to understand their choices more. I just wonder if there's an opportunity for that.
Well, I think there is. You know, the challenge is obviously finding the right time and place, and who would be invested in doing the work. So, you know, here at UWSP, we have our nutrition and master's level students who need to do projects and research. And I think we've jumped on the opportunity as an idea. It's one of those ideas that makes a lot of sense. You say it and it's like, wow, I wish I lived in a world where doctors would prescribe visits to the farmer's market. That's not lost on any of us. But again, I think that what is unfortunate is when we look at the medical setting, what we're looking at is like, and you just brought it up, is you wouldn't qualify as the candidate. Okay. So again, we focus so much attention on disease prevention that we fail the wellness message in a lot of different ways. And so I would ask, like, why wouldn't you be a target? Why wouldn't any of us, every time we go to see our primary care provider, all of us are given information on the farmer's market? And if there is an opportunity to improve health, then that's a second conversation, you know, but all of us should be, and Dee Eddington's one of my favorite people in the wellness field. He's from the University of Michigan. He's done tons of research. He is the strongest advocate for us to be focusing our attention to keeping healthy people healthy. And if we did a better job of keeping healthy people healthy, we would have less disease and incidents. And that just makes so much sense, but it's so hard to fight because we have a reactive system, back to Joel's point. And how do we change a reactive system to a proactive or a preventive system? That's system level change. This isn't like small one organization or one healthcare group. It's an entire industry is built on managing people who are already sick. And one of my favorite wellness practitioners I ever met was a guy named Jack Travis, who opened the first wellness center in the country in California. He finished medical school and he said, I don't want to work with sick people. So if you're sick, okay, go see your doctor and get yourself fixed first, but then come to me and I will keep you healthy. And that was in the 70s and 76. And then that's where a lot of the wellness movement was found, was on keeping healthy people healthy. It wasn't just handling sick people. So I think if we talk about the best opportunity, it isn't going to be just targeting groups of people who are ill. It is targeting healthy people who need to make better choices to stay healthy longer. And so I think that would be something I would want to add into there, so that people like you and I go to our primary care provider, and maybe we have an interest in just eating healthier, and they're equipped to handle that. And that's not where we are today.
So I would also challenge you to think a little differently about the Gwyneth Paltrows and the Oprahs of the world, because the thing that I'm intrigued with those people, I mean, I hear what your point earlier on them, but they are changing the conversation around people who take wellness seriously. And I feel like that there is an opportunity there to pull more of those people into buying, to understanding then where to source locally, right? And how to think about that, even just in the ways that they, from a celebrity standpoint, they see these ideas in a growing group of primarily women who are the ones shopping for their families, to think differently about where they're investing. So I know that's probably a reach, but from where we were, but I feel like it's getting people closer to what you're talking about. How do we touch that already well person, or that person who's already taking their wellness seriously, and bringing them into the local purchasing movement.
Well, and purchasing is the word, isn't it? I mean, none of us have talked. Joel is the closest, talking about the money involved in what we're talking about, right? So I think this is as hard as it gets, is getting people to change in the pocketbook and getting systems to change in the pocketbook. So think about, if I want to use my insurance to my advantage, I have to prove the level of my sickness to be able to use that thing I'm paying for all the time, right? And that's just, so we could sit here for 3 hours, and we could map out the cash flows through the system. And so I want to go back to Joel, and I think Joel's asking a really important question, and I love what Jenny's, leaning in and saying, Gwyneth intrigues me. Let's find out. So why are people being compelled to put their cash in those streams? And how does our Foodshed become a place that cash can flow through? And what do we have to change for that to be true?
Yeah, Farmshed. So this doesn't exactly answer your question, but it does remind me of a grant Farmshed did just recently get awarded from the state. And we're going to be working with the Food Finance Institute at UW-Madison to help us figure out how do we make the frozen assets product line work for Farmshed? Because right now it works for the farms and it works for a certain group of consumers, right? But it actually doesn't work for Farmshed.
Yeah. No, we've been talking about this. Yeah.
Right. And it's not an inexpensive product. But the main point in our grant application was, how do we ensure a healthy year-round product that keeps the level of on-farm income where it is, where it doesn't squeeze out the farmer. So I'm not saying that exactly how we wrote it, but that was the main gist of it, right? Like, most products squeeze the farmer right out. And our goal is to make sure that the farmer, who's primarily looking to sell direct to consumer, diversifying the way Joel's diversifying, how do we keep more of the income on farm versus in other places along the stream? So wish us luck on how we figure that out. I'm really hopeful we're going to have some really cool learning from that helps us with lots of different other programs and ideas that we can share.
Yes, please.
Bam. I'm all for it. So we are well over an hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's getting late. We've covered a lot of topics today, and I'm selfishly excited for them because it's given me lots of material to use in order to sell more CSAs and get more people interested in the idea of local food, local food sheds. So I think the last thing I want to add is we've been, we're kind of circling the wagon of influencers initiating change at a personal or a system-wide level. For me, I guess where I'm taking all of that is, I think it was Lyna that touched on the entry point for individuals. So be it illness, family, performance, prescription, knowledge, environment. It doesn't matter where that person is, what their why is. So much, a huge part of what I do through coaching is understanding that why. I don't need to share that why. It doesn't have to be similar to my why. I just want to understand where they're at and what their why is. And I think this is reminding me of that, and some of maybe the more common whys that I think I will see in the health and fitness world, so I can have this conversation where they're coming from, and then what knowledge do I have of Farmshed, of Lonely Oak, of our local food shed that I can then share with them why it's important for them. So that's
why it's fun. I think that's a piece of it we often miss. It's not definitely just about, being healthy. It's fun. It's fun to go to the farmer's market. It's fun to get to chat with people like Joel and have them give you a hard time and smile their pearly whites at you when they, oh, there we go, there it is. It is. It's fun to learn how to cook with this delicious food. Jan Walter, who's retiring from Farmshed, she's got this. She just talks about it as this honor, with tears in her eyes, about being able to cook with this food, and it is. We are really, really blessed to live where we live, surrounded by all these fabulous young rock stars that we have in our community. So thanks, Bill, for continuing to bring them up and showing them off.
Woo!
You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy to do it. I really appreciate everyone coming on, sharing an hour of their time tonight. Lyna, Derek, anything you want to drop with everyone before, or ask, share? Are you good?
Love you.
Where are we at right now?
Love you. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. So I think we're all hitting on really critical points that hopefully we'll have the opportunity to influence.
Awesome. Great. Joel, Jenny, thanks for coming on. Derek, Lyna, as always, fun times. Everybody watching or listening, we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.